Alright guys, CarlCon's in 10 days, and I'm taking Shield. And my Shield list, I play with it a lot, and it's seen better days. It's looking pretty rough. So I'm gonna make this video. We're gonna try to repair as many of the models as we can, and while we're in there, let's punch some of them up. Things like Bear and Zemo. They're among the first models I've ever painted for the game, and you compare it to like my Spectacular Spider-Man, which is among the most recent models I've ever painted. There's a large difference in like the quality of the list, and since I play with this list the most, I want it to be nice, essentially. So CarlCon's a perfect time. It's a great tournament with a big hobby focus. They have gorgeous boards. I want my models to be gorgeous on those boards. So let's see how much of this we can get done. Okay, blogs are hard. It's now 2 days until CarlCon, but I've gotten a lot done. I started off with working on the grunts. I pinned the missing piece of rope, and I hand sculpted a rope around it. I just wound green stuff around it because I thought that would make the rope shape, and then it ended up not really, so I went in with a sculpting tool, and I resculpted it manually, and then I painted it. And then I realized that painting it, the rope didn't match, so I repainted the entire rope. And then I was like, well, I've got them on the painting handle, so I might as well do the base. Do the more standard, more textured looking base that I do now. And in doing that process, which is my process for doing my bases are essentially now I paint them Deneb Stone, or I think it's actually Stonewall Gray. I think I used a Vallejo one, but it used to be Deadhead. It's like a color mesh in Deneb Stone, which is a now out of print paint from Games Workshop from like when Foundation paints were brand new. I have no idea what it's called now, but anyway, I use this color. It's on screen. That color. That's the color I'm using, and I paint that, and then I wash it with Devlin mud, and then I dry brush it back to that color, and then I add white and I dry brush it again, and that gives me like my like 3-step layered look of my textured bases that brings out all the texture in a marble base. So I do that, and then I realize that I've gotten it all over the ropes, so then I have to repaint the ropes that are on the ground. So I painted the ropes like a million times, so that was fun. Next I fixed Agent Venom's tentacle, which is a little bit tricky, but I used the new trick that I just discovered. I surely couldn't have invented this, but I didn't see anybody else do it, and I thought of it, and it's going great. So I used plastic glue to glue it back in place. The problem is that it creates kind of this visible seam that's really obvious, and normally you have to like sand away the paint and then repaint it, and you still sometimes have a little bit of mismatch. So instead, I covered it in UV resin. UV resin's been like the new hobby toy I've been playing around with. I've been using it a lot. Been using it to like fill the like lights that are on the base of every Marvel model so that they like get really glossy. But now I've been using it to help repair models that break. And so by covering it in this UV resin, I'm going to get a nice seam. And because it's like a viscous liquid, it'll stay there. And then it'll also create a nice taper down. We're going to get a little bit of a bulge. It's just kind of tough to stop that, but that gives us more material right at its weakest point. So I just covered it in the UV resin, hit it with the UV light, and then I just painted back over it. It's pretty invisible at the tabletop level, and if you get really close and you're looking for it, you can definitely find it. All right, next, the last repair. I've got my Namor, who is the newest addition to my roster. He broke in my bag, and then he also broke at Gabe Night when one of his crabs came off. So I glued the crab back on, and then I think I broke the crab off again, and then I glued it back on again. And then I went to try to pin him, and he was pinned before, and the pin has fallen into the base because the base is hollow. And then I did that again this time, so I just glued him in place. But, so he's not glued on there super securely or as securely as I would like because I just like couldn't be bothered with the pin out of frustration. So I did the UV resin trick again. So after he dried, I coated him in resin to give us another layer of protective like nature at the weakest part. and I hit that with the resin light, and then I went back to kill the shine, and I painted the scale 75 paint over it again, which is super flat and removes all that shine by covering it up. All right, and I just started creating a base for Dynamo. I really wanted to rebase Dynamo, which is the one that might get me in a little bit of trouble here. And the reason I'm rebasing Dynamo is because all of my Winter Guard are based on these really cool scenic bases when I was trying to push myself to do better bases. And because I did him first, because he's the best model in the thing, and I bought the whole faction because of Dynamo, he's not on the cool base. And let's give him the cool base. So I start off by layering some cork, and then I have these stones that I stole from my buddy Nick and smuggled to California. And well, these rocks are really cool because they're super porous, and like the super glue just sucks up into them. That can make it a little tricky to glue on, but when they're glued on, they like stay on. And then I just hit it with some basing sand. If anybody has recommendations for basing sand, put them in the comments, because this is the basing sand that I bought when I made my very first army in Warhammer Fantasy like 20 years ago. And it's like I'm down to the absolute dregs of it. You can see in the container, there's like nothing in here. I have to sprinkle it on. I can't dunk it anymore. So I'm looking for a good basing sand that's like good price, but also cool and varied. And I don't know. The Games Workshop basing sand has been up and down and has always been overpriced, but I've had this. It's lasted me a super long time. It's been great. It's changed containers 3 times. But yeah, so that's where the base is now. I will go back and I will cover it with another layer of like watered down glue so that it holds down, and then I will try to paint it. But I'll be back with more updates, hopefully before CarlCon. All right, it's the night before CarlCon, and I managed to get a lot of stuff done, but not as much as I would have liked. I was able to repaint a bunch of the bases in my like classic two-tone style. So like when I originally did my bases for this army or for this squad, or how I originally started doing my MCP bases, is I just kind of painted them Deneb stone, and then I just like inked the lines. So now I'm going back and I'm washing them with Devil and Mud, and then I'm highlighting them back up in the way that I talked about for the shield agents. So I did that for Zemo, Bullseye, the shield agents, a little bit on Agent Venom and on Bucky. And then I finished Dynamo's base. I went back and I coated it in another layer of Elmer's glue so that it dried like on top, not just to the base. That way there's like this hard, so like it just doesn't come off. It's like sealed in there. And then I painted it. I used this like rusty red kind of color. Or it's like if red could be brown. I think it's called Cavalry Brown or Calvary Brown. I'm not really sure. I also use it to do like the red outlines around eyes and stuff. But I did that, and then I dry brushed it with like one of my favorite colors from the Reaper range, which is Snow Shadow. It's like this very blue-white. So next to red, it looks blue, and next to like other blues, it looks white. So I dry brushed the whole thing with this, and then I used these dead grass tufts and light molding paste to create my snow effects. You just kind of like shove it in there, and then like the trick is to kind of like sweep it in a direction to make it look like the wind's blowing in one direction, or that it's like settled up against crevices so it makes sense it's there. Just like helps sell the effect. And then I don't put any extra paint on this because that makes it the whitest thing on the model. So yeah, that wraps up Dynamo. And with that, that's as many models as I'm going to be able to get through for CarlCon. I'm overall pretty happy with it. I think that squad looks way better. It's also not falling apart, which helps a lot. The 2 models I didn't really touch from there are 3 models I didn't really touch from the roster. I think the Commandos and Spectacular Spider-Man are in great shape. Spectacular Spider-Man is the last model I painted from the squad. So everything that I'm trying to do is to get them up to his level. I do kind of want to go back in and brighten up his red, but also you just got to call things done at some point. So I've just called him done. The Commandos, I'm just really happy with how they are. They have a totally different basing scheme. I think they look great. I was gonna do Nick to update the other things, but because he also has this metal steel panel he's standing on, it's like a whole nother big to do to actually update his base because I will inevitably overpaint in between his white boots, and that I didn't really want to get into it. But everybody else is updated. You'll also notice that the squad is only 9 characters, even though there's 10 models because of the grunts. And that's because I'm borrowing a Hulk. I don't have a Hulk. I maybe had dreams of painting him for this. I didn't get it done. I didn't even get him assembled. I worked on this stuff. It turns out that painting on camera is difficult and more time consuming. So with that, that's my squad. You've hopefully heard on the podcast by now how I did at CarlCon, and I hope it was good. Yeah. If you like what's going on here, like and subscribe, and don't forget that fun is a finite resource.